Welcome to the Swine Health Black Belt Podcast, the latest swine health research digested for you. My name is Dr. 𝗘𝘅𝗽𝗁𝗁, and I'm the host of the podcast. Joining me for part 2 of our discussion on the PRRS Outbreak Management Program is Dr. Chris Rademacher. Chris, why don't you give us the full rundown on the POMP program? What exactly is that program, and what's it going to deliver for the industry, and how can folks get involved if they have some interest in it?
Yeah, so it was a program really kind of started by a couple of my colleagues in the field epi group. So Dr. Daniel Lindharris, and some of that was really started with some of his seminal PhD work that he did at the University of Minnesota with Bob Morrison. And then we were fortunate enough a way to recruit him in 2015. So really just about 5 or 6 months after I started. And he's done a lot of work in PRRS surveillance and just trying to understand field applied approaches, to managing this beast that we all are dealing with. So he started this program just for the reason that you say, and that's always one of the questions that we get. And we're really kind of in this active recruitment phase, right? So we have lots of strains and lots of farms, and just like you said, lots of different approaches. So what the idea with it is it's really designed to be a PRRS outbreak epidemiological database, right? We have benchmarking databases for production records and things like that. We don't really have one for how do we manage PRRS, and that's kind of the idea. So really what we're looking for here is a lot of industry participation, veterinarians and producers, being willing to share some information about how they're managing their PRRS outbreaks, with the goal is to get this mass of outbreak information that we can have the talented grad students and statisticians go in there, mine that data, and with enough sample size, hopefully we'll see that, maybe this practice, more so than this practice, is actually effective at either reducing the total losses or getting that far back to stability or baseline production a whole lot quicker. So it's really pretty simple. It's what we're looking at is kind of a 3-4 step process. So the veterinarian would go ahead and contact us, during the outbreak. What we would do is ask them to retain a sample of the original virus. We've got Dr. 𝗘𝗅𝗽𝗏𝗁𝗁, who works as an epidemiologist in our group, has been doing a lot with whole genome sequencing. And what we're finding is there's a lot more information utilizing that technique than the standard simple OR5 sequencing, particularly in that test's ability to find multiple viruses and recombinations of viruses. So that was kind of the one step is to go ahead and retain a sample of that for future testing if that's something that's desired. And then one piece of that is to start filling out a survey. And the survey kind of has, several different blocks of information. There's kind of some herd and personal information like, geographic location of the farm, the genetics, what's the herd size, who's the contact person. Then there's some block on previous and current outbreak information, right? What were the dates? What were the genotypes of the outbreak virus? What was the ASV status? Is the farm going for control or is it going for elimination? Then there's a block of questions on the immunological solutions for the sows and gilts. What material or product are you using? What's the dose? What's the route? What are the age groups? What was happening before the outbreak? And what are the veterinarian and producer planning to do after the outbreak? There's a section on the gilts. What are you going to do with replacement gilts? Are you going to close it? What are the sources? What are the different ages? And then kind of the fifth block is what are some of the on-farm biomanagement strategies? Some of the things that we talk about, are you doing McRebel and what does that mean? Are you continuing to do feedback? Are you using nurse sows? What are you doing for sanitation? How are you handling processing? How are you handling personnel flow, boots, coveralls, things like that? So it's just a series of questions, and we're here certainly to help the veterinarian fill those out. So that's kind of one piece of it, is to go ahead and get that survey filled out. And then the other thing we'll ask for is we work with the veterinarian producer to fill out some documents from a confidentiality standpoint so that if those samples are coming into Iowa State, we can just seamlessly have that information automatically pulled over into the POMP database. And then the third piece of that is to actually get some basic production records. The pieces that are required are just a breeding herd inventory and the number of weaned pigs. Now we can do additional analysis on aborts and pre-wean mortality, stillborns, and farrowing rates and things like that if the producer is interested in sharing that information as well. With the goal of that is to kind of develop these 3 outcome metrics, which is time to stability. So that's at which point the farm starts to test negative, and we kind of got a definition for that. That's the reason why we need the diagnostics to come in. You got the time to baseline production. So that's the time at which the farm from the outbreak resumes back to normal production. When does it hit 100% of budgeted wean pig output? That's kind of time to baseline production. And then the third metric is, what are the total losses expressed per 1,000 sows? How many pigs did we lose through a combination of abortions, stillborns, mummies, pre-wean mortality, pigs that you didn't wean that you expected to during that outbreak metric. So essentially what happens is, kind of from a timeline standpoint, during the outbreak, you retain that virus, you fill out the survey, maybe 10, 12 weeks, farm starts to look stable, we start testing it. And then once the farm looks like it's stable and, there's metrics, whether you're using processing fluids, it might be 8 consecutive weeks of processing fluid, or it might be, 3 or 4 months consecutive wean pig testing, if that's your methodology to do that. Once it looks like the herd's stable, then it's at that point we go ahead and run those outcome metrics. But we need those production records to be able to do that. So that's really kind of it in a nutshell. And then that outbreak goes in the database. So we kind of collect them by outbreak. So it's not unusual if you have some farms that have multiple outbreaks, they could have multiple cases, in that data or in the POMP database. The nice part about it is we have a partnership with Boehringer Ingelheim to provide some diagnostic support. So they're willing to supply up to $700 towards a diagnostic support, kind of help cover PCR or whole genome sequencing tests. The idea behind the whole genome sequencing and why it's important to kind of have the original outbreak virus is it's a little bit different and a little bit more in depth than the regular 𝗚𝗲𝗏 sequencing. So you've got to have a baseline in order to do that. And that's kind of the idea about trying to do that with the initial outbreak virus. You get that one whole genome sequenced. And then if you're getting where it's 20, 30 weeks along, where you'd expect it maybe to get to stability and you're not, now you can go ahead and if you see a blip of aborts or, you're just not seeing things stabilize like you would expect it to, you go ahead and run another whole genome sequencing. And at that point, to see, am I still dealing with the same virus that I had at the original outbreak, or do I have multiple viruses in my farm, or do I have a new virus in my farm? So roughly that dollar amount will cover at least a couple whole genome sequencing. Or if you go back to stability quick and you don't want to use that, you can certainly use that to offset any of the PCR testing, for the routine monitoring. That's another option as well.
Outstanding stuff, Chris. So I'm going to try and just paraphrase everything you said. We've got the ability to do whole genome sequencing and truly characterize every bit of the virus. So we can know what specific virus we have or what viruses we have in the herd. Then we kind of collect, what actions do we take, right? What was our PRRS management process before this? Did we vaccinate? Did we not? That sort of stuff. And then when we had the outbreak, what did we do about it? And then we measure the outcomes. So we've got the combination of the genotype of the virus, the management strategies that we applied before and after the outbreak, and then the outcomes, with the long-term goal that we can data mine all that and say, all right, what are the best management strategies, or the worst management strategies, right? What are the things we do that are associated with good or bad outcomes? And eventually with time, even at the genotype level, right? Some of the very common genotypes that float around in the industry, well, we know this, Chris, like some of them hammer the gestation barn. Some of them hammer the farrowing house, and some of them are more grow finish, right? Presumably different management strategies would be better there. But hopefully with time, we can identify some of those things and say, maybe with all viruses, this is best practice. And then with some specific viruses, boy, you really might want to think about doing these specific steps as well. Is that a fair kind of summary?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
𝗘𝘅𝗽𝗃𝗁, the pioneer postbiotic for digestive health in pigs, brought to you by 𝗘𝘅𝗽𝗽𝗀𝗏. With over a century of experience in postbiotics for digestive health, 𝗘𝘅𝗽𝗃 contains heat-treated lactobacillus cell bodies and their metabolites. Stable by nature, 𝗘𝘅𝗽𝗃 can be easily stored and incorporated in compound feed.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Chris, for coming on the program, and thanks for everything that you do for the industry. I know you just got off of the NPIC meeting and sharing information about sow mortality. You're always working on things that are very important for our industry, and I can't thank you enough for all that effort.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on and being able to talk about it.
Well, thanks to our audience for listening in. Your the sponsor support is what allows Chris and I to do these sorts of things. So thank you very much. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, please take the opportunity to do so you don't miss out on Chris's podcast as well as all the other good presenters that we've got on. I really want to thank you again, Chris. Please come on. I think this was our second or third one. Let's make it 3 or 4. So please come on again.
Sounds good. Appreciate it.
All right. For Dr. Chris Rademacher, I'm Dr. 𝗘𝗃𝗁𝗁. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your day. Hey, everybody. We're always searching for the latest and greatest research to share each week. If you have a swine health related research trial and would like to come on the show and talk about it, share it with us, please feel free to email the research to hello@wisenetics.com. That's HELLO@WISENETIX.com.